There's a special kind of betrayal when the people who should lift you up tear you down instead. But what happens when those same people, after years of mocking your dreams, suddenly want a piece of your hard-won success? That's my story, and trust me, it gets intense. My name is Alex. I'm 26, and I've been running my own online business for a little over 3 years now. It all started back in college, just a desperate attempt to make some extra cash while juggling assignments and classes. At first, it was nothing fancy, just a small dropshipping store selling gadgets. But like a lot of these side hustles, it started to snowball. I poured countless hours into it, learning everything about marketing, branding, and all that jazz. And eventually, it started bringing in some serious money. In the beginning, my parents were supportive in that classic, "Oh, you'll grow out of it," kind of way. You know the vibe. "That's cute, sweetie, but what's your real plan?" They genuinely thought it was just a phase, a silly little hobby that would fizzle out once I graduated and got a real job. My dad would constantly tell me to focus on my studies, and my mom, well, she'd always chime in about how people don't really make a living from online businesses. "You need to be practical, Alex." I get it to some extent. Older generations tend to be pretty skeptical about newer, less traditional paths. But at the time, I truly felt like I was building something real, something that could actually work long-term. Now, my parents aren't bad people, not really. They're just a little old-fashioned, I guess. They'd always had stable 9-to-5 jobs, and the whole idea of running a business from your bedroom or a coffee shop just seemed completely alien to them. My dad's a lawyer, my mom's a nurse. They grew up with very clear ideas about what success looked like. You go to school, you get a degree, you work a traditional job. Anything else was just a distraction. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I kept grinding. Late nights, after classes, I'd be buried in books, watching YouTube tutorials. Slowly but surely, I started to turn a profit. That side hustle that had begun as a way to buy some extra gear eventually became my full-time job. The first year was brutal. Lots of sleepless nights, moments where I honestly thought it would all come crashing down. But by year 2, things really started to click. I had my own website, a steady stream of customers, and most importantly, I wasn't just making pocket money anymore. I was making enough to pay rent, buy a car, and even take a vacation every once in a while. And that, my friends, is when the drama really started. It was Christmas of my 3rd year in business when things hit the fan. My parents invited me over for dinner, like always. We were just sitting around the table, enjoying some food. My mom was going on about how tough the economy was and how nobody had disposable income anymore. To be honest, I wasn't really listening. My mind was buzzing with ideas for a new product launch. But then my dad chimed in. "You know, Alex," he said, looking at me over the rim of his glass, "it's nice that you're making money from this little business of yours, but don't you think it's time you focused on something more serious? People like you don't usually make it big doing whatever it is you're doing." My face flushed. I'd heard versions of this before, but this time felt different. More direct. More condescending. It felt like he thought what I was doing just didn't matter. I put my fork down. "Dad, I am focusing on something serious. This is my business, and it's working. I've made more this year than you and Mom combined." My mom shot me a look. My dad scoffed. "Oh, come on, Alex. That's just some internet nonsense. You can't be serious." I could feel the anger simmering inside me, but I tried to stay calm. "I am serious, Dad. I'm making enough money to support myself, and I'm doing something that makes me happy. You guys have always been so focused on the idea of a real job, but I'm living my dream. I don't need a 9-to-5 to be successful." There was a long silence. My parents exchanged a look. Then my dad's face darkened. "Don't get too cocky, Alex," he said, his voice stern. "You're not as special as you think. People fail at this stuff all the time. You'll see." And that was that. The rest of the evening was a blur of forced small talk and awkward silences. But inside I was seething. It wasn't just that they didn't believe in me. It was that they couldn't even try to understand. They saw my success as a fluke, and that hurt more than I wanted to admit. But things only got worse after that. Over the next few months, my business continued to grow. I expanded into new markets, hired a small team, and even started getting some recognition in the industry. And as it got bigger, so did my parents' attitude. At first, they kept up their, "Oh, that's cute" routine. But then it became clear they were getting jealous. My dad would make little comments whenever I'd talk about my success. "Must be nice to have all that free time to play on your computer." It started to get under my skin, but I kept my mouth shut, focusing on growing my business. I wasn't going to let their negativity stop me. Then, about 6 months ago, it all came to a head. I was sitting at home one Saturday afternoon, working on a new product launch, when I got a call from my mom. She was practically giddy on the phone, which was a bit unusual for her. "Alex, you'll never guess who called me today," she chirped. "Who?" I asked, a little distracted. "Your dad's old business partner. He was asking about you, asking if you could help him with some marketing for his law firm. He said he was impressed with what you've been doing and he wants to offer you a job." Isn't that amazing? I nearly dropped my phone. "Wait, a job?" "Yeah," she beamed. "He's offering you a position at his firm to handle all their online marketing. It's a great opportunity, Alex. You'll be set for life if you take it." I was absolutely floored. My parents had just spent the past 3 years telling me my business was a joke. And now, suddenly, they wanted me to work for some guy in a real job, just because he noticed my success? They couldn't have been more out of touch. "I'm not interested," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm doing just fine with my business. I don't need to work for anyone else." "Well, I think you're being a little stubborn, don't you? This could really help you, Alex." We could really use the money, and it's a great career move for you." I let out a deep breath. "No, I don't need a job, and I'm not going to work for anyone else. I'm successful on my own." That's when the conversation took a chilling turn. "Alex," she said, her voice a little more serious now, "if you're going to continue doing this business thing, you need to understand that you owe us something. After all the money we spent on your education, you could at least help us out a little. It's the least you can do." My stomach dropped. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "You want me to pay you back?" I asked, incredulous. "Well," she said, "you've been successful now. We could use a little help. You owe it to us." I laughed bitterly. "You're kidding, right? I'm serious, Alex. You've got the money now. It's only fair." It was like a switch flipped in my brain. All that pent-up anger I'd been feeling over the years finally bubbled to the surface. They hadn't just ignored my success, they were actively trying to take advantage of it. That's when I decided it was time to teach them a lesson. But I wasn't sure exactly how to do it yet. I had to think it through carefully. I sat there staring at my phone, not entirely sure how to process what my mom had just said. A cold wave of disbelief washed over me, immediately followed by anger. It felt like a punch to the gut. My parents, who'd spent years belittling my business, now wanted me to hand over my success like it was some kind of inheritance they were entitled to. "Mom, are you seriously asking me to pay you back for all the money you spent on my education?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've never even believed in what I'm doing, and now you want to cut because it's working? That's not how this works." There was a brief pause on the other end. Then she sighed. "Alex, you're making this harder than it needs to be. We've supported you all these years, and now that you're doing well, we should get something out of it." I wanted to scream, to tell her how absolutely ridiculous she sounded, but I knew if I lost my cool, it would only give her more ammunition to accuse me of being ungrateful. "I'm not asking for anything, Alex," she continued, her voice softening, trying to sound reasonable. "I'm just saying, help us out a little. You don't have to give us all your money. Just..." I cut her off. No. That's not happening. There was a long silence, and for a moment, I thought maybe she was finally getting it. But then her voice came back, quieter, more insistent. You're being selfish, Alex. Don't forget who helped you get where you are. All this could have been so much harder if we didn't help you out in the beginning. The word stung. It was like a slap in the face, but it also gave me the clarity I needed. My whole life, I had been expected to follow their rules, to fit into their world. I'd never been allowed to chart my own course without being reminded of their sacrifices and how much they had helped me along the way. Well, you didn't help me by making fun of what I was doing, I said, my voice rising. You didn't help me when you said it was just a phase. You didn't believe in me until it started making money. So, no, I don't owe you anything. And that was when I heard it. The sharp intake of breath, the quiet, sharp gasp that told me my mom was pissed. Alex, she said, her voice trembling now. Don't talk to me like that. You're not a little kid anymore. You can't just ignore everything we did for you. I'm not ignoring it. I snapped, my patience starting to wear thin. But you need to understand something. I built this on my own. No one helped me. And you know what? I don't need to pay you back for it. Fine, she said, her voice cold now. We'll see. Just remember, you wouldn't have gotten this far without us. I hung up. My heart was pounding in my chest and I was shaking. I couldn't believe what had just happened. It felt like everything had shifted. My parents had always been distant in their support of my business. But now they were entitled. It was like they had been waiting for the moment when they could lay claim to my success. And I wasn't going to let that happen. For the next couple of weeks, I stewed on it. I didn't talk to them. I couldn't. The more I thought about how they treated me, the angrier I became. It wasn't just the money they wanted. It was the recognition. They couldn't stand the fact that I was successful on my own terms. But the idea of letting them walk all over me, of giving in to their demands, wasn't an option anymore. I wasn't going to be the nice, obedient son who bent over backward to keep the peace. No, I was done. I started thinking about the ways I could hit them where it would hurt the most. They wanted money. But what they didn't understand was that my business was more than just money. It was my independence. It was my ability to stand on my own 2 feet. And that was something they could never take away from me, no matter how much they tried. And then, a few days later, I got an idea. I was at my computer, going over some business reports, when I checked my emails. One that stood out was from an old friend from college, John. He'd been a marketing guru back in school and had gone on to do pretty well for himself. I hadn't spoken to him in months, but when I opened the email, I saw that it was about a potential partnership. John had recently started working with a new startup, and they were looking to partner with small businesses like mine. As I read through the details of the proposal, it hit me. If I accepted this deal, it would be huge. It wasn't just about the money. It was about expanding my business into a new market and solidifying my reputation as a real player in the industry. The kind of partnership that my parents, in all their practicality, would never even dream of. And that's when the plans started to form in my head. I decided to take the deal. But there was a catch. John's company was offering to do a series of press releases and interviews for me. Big-name publications, online blogs, and even some local news stations. If I took the deal, my business would be thrust into the public eye. Everyone would know who I was, including my parents. I could already imagine their faces when they saw the first article about me. When they read about how my business had just secured a partnership with a top-tier company. When they saw my name in big letters on the front page of a website they'd probably never even heard of. I wasn't going to ask for their approval anymore. I was going to make them see how wrong they were. As the press releases went live, I could feel the tension building. I knew they were bound to find out soon, and I couldn't wait to see how they reacted. They'd been so sure I wouldn't make it, so sure I'd fail. But I wasn't going to fail. I was going to keep growing, keep expanding, and keep succeeding until I had enough of my own to show them that I didn't need their validation anymore. And then one afternoon, a couple of weeks later, I got the call. It was from my dad. "Alex," he said, his voice tight. "We need to talk." I could feel my pulse quicken. "About what?" "I saw the article." I didn't even have to ask which article. I already knew. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my cool. "Pretty impressive, huh?" He didn't respond immediately. Instead, there was a long, uncomfortable silence. Finally, he spoke again, his tone softer, almost defeated. "We need to talk in person." I leaned back in my chair, gripping the phone a little tighter. My dad's tone was different, less demanding, more measured, but I wasn't going to be fooled. I knew how this worked. They saw something they wanted, and now they were trying to play nice to get it. "I'm busy," I said, keeping my voice flat. "If you have something to say, you can say it now." "Alex," he sighed. And for a second, I could almost hear the frustration bleeding through. "Come on, we just want to talk face to face." I could have laughed. Just weeks ago, they were mocking my stupid little business, and now they wanted to sit down and have a serious discussion? "Why?" I asked. "You made it pretty clear what you thought about my business before. What's changed?" The pause. "Things are just different now," he said carefully. "Your mother and we just think maybe there's a way we can all work together." There was. I couldn't stop the bitter smile from creeping onto my face. "You mean you want money?" "Alex?" "No, don't Alex me," I cut him off. "Let's be honest here. If my business had failed, you wouldn't be calling me right now. You wouldn't be inviting me over for a talk. You'd still be laughing about how I should have stuck to a real job. But now that I've made something of myself, suddenly you care." I let out a dry laugh. "That's funny." "Don't be like this," he said, his voice sharper now. "We're still your parents." "And that means what exactly?" I shot back. "That I owe you for everything I've ever done? That just because you raised me, I have to hand over my success like it's some family heirloom?" I could hear him take a deep breath. "You're making this a bigger deal than it needs to be." "No," I said firmly. "I'm just finally seeing things clearly." Another silence. This time it stretched on longer, the weight of it heavy between us. Finally, he exhaled sharply. "Fine if that's how you feel." He hung up on me. I stared at my phone. I should have felt angry. I should have been frustrated. Instead, I felt relieved. For the first time in years, I had set a boundary and held it. No guilt, no second-guessing, just a firm, undeniable line in the sand. But I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. For the next few weeks, I braced myself for the fallout. And sure enough, it came. First, it was the passive-aggressive text from my mom. "I don't understand why you're being so cold to us, Alex. We only ever wanted what was best for you. You don't just turn your back on family. That's not how we raised you." Then the guilt tripping. "You know, your father and I are struggling right now. We've done so much for you. The least you could do is help us out just a little." I didn't respond. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me into feeling responsible for their situation. If they were struggling financially, it wasn't because of me. It wasn't like they had ever invested in my business or supported me when I needed help. They had mocked me, laughed at me, and now they wanted to act like they were owed something. I ignored the messages. Then came the escalation. One evening, I was working late at my office when I got a call from an unknown number. I wouldn't have answered, but something told me to pick up. "Hello, Alex." It was my mom, but something was off. Her voice was tight, almost like she was holding back anger. I sighed. "What is it? Why didn't you tell us you moved offices?" My stomach dropped. "How did you know that?" There was a long pause, and then she said it. "We came by." My skin went cold. "They came by. I wanted to surprise you," she continued, her voice sickly sweet. But I could hear the frustration beneath it. But imagine my shock when I realized you weren't even working out of your old place anymore. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. You had no right to do that. Excuse me? You heard me. I snapped. You don't just show up unannounced. That's not normal. That's not okay. Oh, so now we need permission to visit our own son? She said, her voice sharp. We've always been there for you, Alex. We've always been your family. And now that you're making money, you're acting like we're strangers. I clenched my jaw. That's because you're strangers to my success, I said coldly. You weren't there when I was struggling. You weren't there when I was putting in 16-hour days to build this from nothing. You only care now because it benefits you. She scoffed. You're unbelievable. I'm starting to wonder if we even raised you right. That hit me, but not in the way she intended. Because the truth was, I wasn't the same person they raised. I had fought, worked, and bled for my success on my own terms, and I wasn't about to let them take any of it from me. You didn't, I said. I raised myself. And with that, I hung up. The next morning, I got a text from my dad. You've made your choice, Alex. But don't forget, you're not the only one who can play hardball. I stared at the message. What did that mean? I had no idea what they were planning. I didn't reply to my dad's text. I didn't need to. I already knew what was coming. The thing about my parents was that they didn't just lose. They didn't just let things go. If they couldn't guilt me, they'd try to force my hand. And if that failed, they'd do what they always did, make themselves the victims. Sure enough, the fallout started almost immediately. First, it was the relatives. Alex, your parents are so hurt. They don't understand why you're shutting them out. Family is more important than money. You'll regret this one day. They did everything for you. The least you could do is give back. I ignored every single message. I wasn't about to get dragged into another round of manipulation. Then they went public. I found out through a friend that my mom had taken to social media, posting a long, dramatic rant about how certain children forget where they come from once they get a little success. She never named me outright, but the message was crystal clear. She talked about how they sacrificed so much for me, how they always supported my dreams, which was a blatant lie, and how they were so proud of what I'd built, but heartbroken that I had turned my back on my family. I rolled my eyes. The comments were exactly what I expected. A bunch of well-meaning but clueless people sympathizing with them, telling them how ungrateful I was, how they deserved better. I didn't bother defending myself. I knew the truth, and the people who actually mattered knew it too. But then they crossed the line. They showed up at my office. I was in the middle of a meeting when my assistant buzzed me. Alex, there's a man and a woman here. They say they're your parents. My stomach dropped. I'll handle it, I said, getting up. When I walked out, I found them standing in the lobby, my mom looking around like she belonged there, my dad standing stiffly beside her. Alex, she said, her voice bright and cheerful, like this was a normal visit. I folded my arms. What are you doing here? My dad sighed, shaking his head. This is ridiculous. We're family. We shouldn't be fighting like this. We just want to talk, my mom added, clasping her hands together like she was pleading. I stared at them, barely able to believe the audacity. You showed up uninvited to my place of business, I said, my voice low and controlled. Do you have any idea how insane that is? My dad's face darkened. You're making this harder than it needs to be. No, you are, I shot back. I told you my answer. I don't owe you anything. I'm not giving you money. I'm not letting you worm your way into my business. And I am done with the guilt trips. My mom's expression twisted. So, you're really going to cut us off? Just like that? Yes. That one word hung in the air. Heavy. Final. You raised me, I continued, and for that, I'll always be grateful. But being my parents doesn't mean you get unlimited access to my life. It doesn't mean you get to take from me just because you don't like how things turned out. My dad's jaw clenched. You'll regret this. I let out a short, humorless laugh. No, I really won't. I turned to my assistant. If they ever show up here again, call security. Then I walked away. That was the last time I saw them. They tried to reach out a few more times. More texts, more calls, more messages from flying monkeys trying to guilt me into reconnecting. I ignored all of it. It's been over a year now. At first, it felt strange. There was this lingering guilt, this tiny voice in my head whispering, "But they're your parents." But over time, that voice got quieter. Because the truth is, my life is better without them in it. My business is thriving. I'm surrounded by people who actually support me, who don't see me as a walking ATM or a means to an end. And for the first time in my life, I feel truly free. It's a peace I never thought I'd have, and it was worth every painful moment to get it.